I mean, what the hell?
Okay, so the Bible.
Perhaps we need a hefty dose of the good book.
From the Greek biblia, meaning the books.
What's that kind of talk or you'll get your heathen head smacked?
Oh, that's very Christian. Believe what I say or I'll hurt you.
Now you're getting it.
The best-selling book of all time. Where to even begin? How about Before the Beginning? It's really the sequel to the Torah. And most editions come in an omnibus edition that runs about 2,000 pages or so. Jesus Christ, who has time to read any of that? I hear there's a lot of book clubs that meet like once a week where they get around and read little parts of it and have long, in-depth discussions, but that's really not my thing. Now, if Oprah recommended it, then we might talk. Now, I say it's a sequel, but it can't really be understood without reading the first half of it. I noticed there's another sequel that never gets included, though I can't imagine why.
Faith was a Passover Seder.
And if I'm not mistaken, Islam is also in that same spiritual family.
Let's not muddy things up here.
So, unlike in the Greek tradition, it doesn't start in the midst of things, but goes back to literally the beginning of time and describes how this asshole God created the universe and everything in it. Odd, since it was translated into Greek from Aramaic, as the Greeks were the only ones who actually wanted to read this crap. So this is very James Michener, an author known for his epic novel of Hawaii called Hawaii. God is the main character, and trust me, you're going to spend a lot of time with him, so get comfortable. So the universe is sitting there, minding its own business, and suddenly God drops these two assholes named Adam and Eve into his day garden. And they're bumming around, being naked, and having some wild sex, and then the girl gets hungry and eats an apple. Dumb bitch. Women ruin everything. But to be fair, she doesn't just eat the apple, she's actually coerced by a talking snake who's supposed to be the first encounter with the embodiment of evil, later known as Satan. This character is the shit. I mean, this is clearly why people love this book so much. Satan is supposed to be the villain of the piece, which really contrasts with the anti-heroic nature of the main hero, God, who I'll be getting to in a bit. Satan is just one of those villains, a real Mephistopheles, the kind of villain who lurks in the shadows, but his deviousness is felt throughout the novel. In his few rare appearances, he's nothing but silver-tongued and manipulative, tempting our weak, pathetic human characters into dens of sin and destruction. And this is his first great act, seducing vulnerable young Eve into eating something as simple as an apple. And apparently this was God's special apple, so he says, "You two get the hell out of my house," and he sends them out into the wilderness. And then they have some more wild sex and pop out a couple of little fuck trophies. And then their kids go and kill each other, and apparently the surviving kid sires the monster from the old Beowulf poem. Jeez, you gotta love it when the fan fiction beats the hell out of the source material. It is interesting that this book follows the tradition of women being the destroyers and sowers of discord, such as Helen of Troy in Greek mythology, Beset in Egyptian myth, and Stephanie Meyer in modern times. The other big problem this establishes is just how much of a jerk God is in this story. It can work having a total asshole as your main character if you do it right, but I just don't think this book really conveys that sense of legitimate perspective the way that Michael Corleone or Alex from A Clockwork Orange have. God is kind of like a poorly written superhero. He can do anything, but wastes his powers on the petty problems of a few people. It works well in the confines of a small fairy tale, like a single issue of Superman or something, but when you stretch it out over this ridiculous amount of time, it just makes you wonder why the poor bastard never gets anything done. And it's not like he's supposed to be the author or anything. He just sits around and bitches all day about the injustice in the world that he created and wonders why no one does anything about it. And this does kind of contrast with the overtly villainous nature of the Satan character. Like, no matter how much of a dick God is, Satan will always be worse. Or will he? It's almost as though Satan is rebelling against a tyrant king, but won't stoop to any low to achieve his goal, as though he's been swallowed up by his own evil. But he does change towards the end of the story, so let's get back on track. So then it gets kind of fuzzy. I mean, there's a lot to cover, and I can't hit everything in it. Really, the book reads like a collection of loosely connected short stories, and they don't all tie in very well. So let's skip ahead a bit. Suddenly, there's a shit ton of people, large empires, and a bunch of squat, hairy assholes get enslaved by one of the greatest civilizations in history, the Egyptian Empire. It's supposed to be during the reign of Ramses II, one of the great warrior kings in all of history. It's unique in that it takes place from the perspective of the conquered people, showing their discontent with His Majesty's royal ass and his deification of himself. It really makes him out to be a jerk, which makes me think of how all the great conquerors of history were really jerks in the end. I guess that's why this book appeals to the scrawny, nerdy types who are too busy reading to work out and be badasses. Oh well. Anyway, so the slaves are supposed to be Jews, and they elect this asshole who was a champion. They decided he was a champion because God was going to kill him because his son was uncircumcised, and then he circumcised his son and spilled the blood on his feet.
Like, seriously, that's in the Bible. It's really weird.
Interestingly, rather than simply beat Ramses and his bullshit in submission, he patiently waits while that asshole God does a bunch of crap to him, which the warrior king shrugs off and is like, meh, to the curses that are unleashed on him. Holy Moses, he already prays to the Egyptian gods who are fucking badass, so what's this guy gonna do? On that note, tangentially, I just wanted to say that the Egyptian mythology is one of my favorite mythos, with a long, complex system of beliefs and hardcore, balls-to-the-wall stories, even better than the Greeks, which I really adore too. These Mediterranean warrior cultures, man, there's just nothing like them. And I've heard, I can't confirm, but I have heard that the Greeks and the Egyptians actually believed in each other's gods, thinking that they were just manifestations of the same deities. This can be seen in the conclusion of the Roman novel The Golden Ass, where literally the goddess Isis marches out of the sea and declares that she is simply known by other names throughout the lands. Insert obligatory Allahu Akbar joke here.
Pharaoh didn't put the sound in later.
But who know the difference?
The people being whipped.
But getting back on track, when the leader of the enslaved people gives out God's decrees, the very first one is that they're not allowed to believe in other gods but him, showing just how jealous he really is of the other gods. I guess he's got a small penis, I don't know. Curiously, he also says not to murder and treat people fairly and things, but a running theme throughout the book is how the followers of this god run around and kill anyone who opposes them, often enslaving them in the same way that the Egyptians enslaved them.
Lord, the Lord Jehovah has given unto you these 10 commandments.
I suppose this is about how regimes rise and fall, and the ideals you're born with decay into the ideals of your enemies. But then God sits around and bitches about it. And getting back to the comparison with the Greek gods thing, there's no sense of humanity to this god. Like, he's just playing with people as though their lives are nothing more than the pieces of a chessboard to him. He's not like Zeus, who's burdened with lots of problems, but when people pray to him properly, he suddenly looks at their little corner of the world. He's portrayed as all-knowing and all-powerful, but powerless when it really counts. But, getting back to the story, again, the slaves finally escape after murdering a bunch of Egyptian babies. Yeah, they blame it on God, but we know it's really...
And you cannot go around killing people.
Why?
Because it is one of God's commandments, thou shalt not kill.
Why?
Because it is a sin.
Why?
Because it's not nice.
Why?
Up, and then they get stuck out in the desert for a while and finally reach a new place. Then God gets jealous of these other people who are throwing the ultimate party. They get some sodomia and Gomorrah going, and much like Arnold before him, he crashes it.
So who are you, man? Shit!
I'm the party pooper.
Now, God is a kindergarten cop. I'd watch that. Could you imagine if people read this book to their kids? Talk about growing up with problems. So next, God starts talking to this guy Leviticus, and he tells him all these rules people need to follow. In particular, these rules about not having sex. I mean, are you high? Listen, bub, you can promise all the fire and brimstone you want, but that ain't gonna stop the penis. Hate to break it to you. Another big story I hear a lot about, they made a movie recently, is about this asshole Noah. good lord, the story of Noah. So after ruining the greatest party ever, God decides the whole world is having too much fun. He says the world is too awesome and he's going to drown the bastards. But he doesn't want to drown all the bastards, so he tells this guy Noah to build an ark. No, not that one, more like this.
Get some wood, build it 300 cubits by 80 cubits by 40 cubits. Right. What's a cubit? Let's see, a cubit. I used to know what a cubit was. Well, don't worry about that, Noah.
Then they have to go around and round up all the animals 2 by 2, except for the unicorns, and he puts his family on the ship, and there's a big war, and there's rock monsters, and suddenly it turns into, like, The Shining, and I swear to God, I'm not making any of this up.
It is a weird movie. I ain't got words for it.
So then there's this other story about David and Goliath, where a kid beats up a retarded giant guy. It's horrible. The guy was big, but, he was soft in the head, and this little brat throws a rock at him until he falls over, and then he runs in and cuts his head off. I don't even think the guy was dead! Holy cow! David later wanted to marry the king's daughter and was instructed to bring back 100 foreskins for the king's approval, thinking the boy couldn't do it. He didn't, naturally. He brought back 200. So a bunch of more stuff happens, and then this guy Jonah shows up. He's out fishing one day and gets eaten by a whale. Yeah! This is a little more my speed. But instead of just being, digested, he hangs out in the whale's belly for a couple of days, again praying to God, who eventually tickles the whale or something and gets him to barf Jonah up. And then he just leaves him there. Very Moby Dick, but this book wishes it was Herman Melville. Next, God decides to pick on this poor guy named Job. Not Job, but Job. He's sitting there, minding his own business, and then my good buddy Satan gets to his sweet-talking. He says Job is only happy because God's given him all this stuff, and if he takes it away, he won't like his life. And God, being an asshole, gets Satan to fuck with the poor guy. He says that he's trying to test his faith for some vague reason, but let's be real. He's just fucking with him just because he can. And worst of all, this scene is actually a repeat of a scene earlier. Yeah, they thought that I'd forgotten a couple hundred pages, but I remember. There's this guy Abraham, and God tells him to kill his son, but it turns out he's just fucking with him too.
You want to tell me what the that was?
As if the book wasn't long enough, it starts ripping itself off. And then they just start singing. There's these psalms, and they're just a random adulations of this God who does nothing but pick on people. There's like 100 pages of these psalms, I guess, and I thought they were so good they just threw in as many as possible. Here's one, listen.
Evil, reprobate Jews, God hates you Christ killers, bloody savage land killers.
Christ, I'd hate to see what's on the cutting room floor. So then, after the singing finally ends, we get to this guy, King Solomon. He's taken over Israel and is supposed to be the wisest ass in all the land. I actually like this character. He's smart, he's funny, he gives an insight into how hard it is just to be king to a group of people, which is interestingly contrasted with the God character who uses his ultimate power for little more than self-amusement, while King Solomon uses it for more noble ends, trying to take care of his people. And of course, the best bit of this is when these two ladies are sitting there arguing over a baby, each claiming they own the baby, and Solomon cuts the little tyke in half. I guess this was the predecessor to Springer.
A dispute. They each claim ownership of this pie.
The pie shall be cut in two, and each man shall receive death.
So, it's about this time that we get into the second half of the story, which follows the Son of God named Jesus. Now things get interesting. Apparently God is so pimp, he can score with a girl and she'll stay a virgin. Dios mio, this sounds like something out of a beer ad.
Is the most interesting Messiah in the world.
I wonder what went into the thought process of this story arc. Like, the lady's supposed to be married to a guy, but she's still a virgin. Like, was she cheating on him and just blamed it on God?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Or did God have a reputation for doing this sort of thing? Did he just go down to the bar and be like, yeah, guys, you want to see how hard I can score with this chick? Check it out. And what's even weirder is that apparently there's a whole group of fans of this book that single this virgin character out and say she's the most important person in the book. I like that. A fan club within a fan club. How many t-shirts is that going to sell?
Private Joker, do you believe in the Virgin Mary?
Sir, no, sir!
Well, Private Joker, I don't believe I heard you correctly.
This is interesting as it gets back to the more comforting motherly role of women as opposed to the destroyers of peace in the old books. I don't know if this is feminist or anti-feminist or what, but it shows a genesis of the idea. And apparently this is one of the big scenes from the book, with the holy birth in a freaking barnyard. And then there's these three wise guys who come and give him cash. That's a pretty good birthday gift. But the scene didn't get real famous until a later edition, when they added a fat old bearded asshole in a red suit. Why he's there, I have no idea, but he's just so jolly I can't help but like him. However, I hear the Jesus character and he never really got along.
Yoktuki!
Oh my god! They killed Kenny!
But, like I say, her son is now the main character, and he's, of course, the Son of God. So I guess it's supposed to be like a family thing. Like, the whole book has been following generations of people, fathers and sons, kings and queens, James Michener style, showing how things evolve and change, and suddenly the whole action of the story slows down to a crawl, and it just follows this one asshole around for literally his entire life. It starts when he's a little baby and he gets hunted down by the Romans. See, first it was Egyptians, now it's Romans. Again, showing how the persecuted individual's point of view, only this time under a different regime. I guess it's supposed to be something about how the Egyptians have only been replaced in name by another completely totalitarian warrior society, and it doesn't matter who's on top. If you're on bottom, it sucks. But I think they just ran out of ideas and started repeating themselves. Again. Anyway, so the Romans want this baby dead, they want his family dead, and they want his house burned to the ground, but he manages to escape and is raised in secret. And he's supposed to be so smart. He talks back to his teachers when he's at school, argues with his father, and gets drunk on weekends like any good teenager.
I'm sorry, Jesus, but my house, my rules.
Up yours, Joseph! You're not my real dad!
Hello?
Hey, Dad. It's me.
But after a relatively wild ride as a bratty kid, he gets settled in his life as a carpenter. I don't know why someone with infinite power would need to be a carpenter, but I guess he was just good at that sort of thing. He gets to be so good at it that he gets 12 really good friends of his, and they run around raising hell and taking names. One of Jesus' best moments, I mean, this is the thing legends are made of, is his performance at the wedding at Cana. They decide they're too thirsty and that the water they have ain't good enough. Jesus works his magic and turns the water into wine. Oh yeah! I guess they didn't have beer back then, but who cares? This is the greatest superpower ever conceived of. Let's say he could turn water into anything. Beer, whiskey, Jägermeister. Imagine the kind of frat party you could throw if you did all that. Imagine if he was a superhero like Drunko Man and he fights crime by hosing crooks with booze. So, after this all-time high, he decides he's going out fishing one day, and he gets caught on a stormy sea, and just when all seems lost, he asks his dad for a favor, and he stops the winds. See? Rich kids just get whatever they want. Next, he goes out and starts talking to so many people that he runs out of food. So, he has to use his magic powers to multiply the food and feed those fat asses. What is he, fast food? I mean, you think he could end the world hunger with something like this.
Shit, man, I envy you for not having to deal with this right now. He's dead! Oh, if only we could have saved him!
But I guess the apple just doesn't fall from the tree, and he doesn't ever do it again. I don't know, maybe he got too much pressure from his dad, like he wanted to be different, but he couldn't soil the family name. So he runs around some, does a little bit of moonwalking on water, performs a couple more magic tricks, and then aliens invade. Finally decides he's going to head out into the desert. He's the ultimate Lawrence of Arabia cosplayer. So he heads back out there, and my boy Satan appears again and tempts him with all these riches and things, but Jesus resolutely refuses. This is really Satan's big scene, where he shows all the wealth and power that Jesus could assimilate, proving his ultimate worth by tempting people with material goods instead of God's vague promise of spiritual fulfillment in the afterlife. I think it's at this point we really realize just how pathetic God's promises really are, and in the end, there's no real difference between him and his hated enemy. But Jesus actually points out how stupid it would be to try and tempt someone with infinite power. Like, what would the devil have to offer him? I know I praised the devil earlier, but this was really a misstep for him. So finally, Jesus comes back, and he's hailed as a hero. And what do Romans do to heroes who aren't Roman? Kill the bastards! They decide they're going to kill Jesus in the most horrible manner possible. They want to crucify his ass. Crucify him. Yeah, that was a real practice back then, where they would force people to carry conjoined pieces of wood, nail them into them, and then leave them out to starve. They would decorate the roads with these crosses, oftentimes leaving the bodies on them to rot and decay, sending a message to passers-by what happens when you fuck with Rome.
Jesus.
You said it, man. Nobody fucks with the Jesus.
And trust me, this depiction is ruthless, showing how Jesus is whipped and beaten, spit on and abused, constantly harassed until finally he gets the only thing that can save him from such a monstrous fate. He dies. You know, this book is hardcore when the happy ending involves the hero dying horribly.
My son went down to Earth once. I don't know what you people did to him, but he hasn't been the same since.
Oh, he'll be fine.
And that's not just the thing. This image with Jesus on the cross is like the main symbol of the book. Yeah, it's on all the covers and all the t-shirts. You'll find fans of it carrying around necklaces, which they strangely never wear. Like, this is the big scene from the book. They talk about violence in the movies today. The chest burster in Alien, the shower scene in Psycho, the girl being eaten from Jaws. But this one has to take the cake. A true master of horror that trumps even Alfred Hitchcock. Maybe Mel Gibson. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. So after about 3.5 hours of grueling torture, pain, and suffering, the guy finally dies. Then they put him in the ground. Well, not in the ground per se, but they throw his ass in a cave. Then 3 days later, he actually rises from the dead.
Hey, wait a minute. Why did it take you 3 days to come back? Why couldn't you just do it right away?
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you ever been dead before?
Yeah, he rises and tells them the whole point of the story. To be friendly and peaceful, and you too can die horribly. Wait, isn't this the same thing from that shitty Cinderella movie?
Have courage and be kind.
I wonder if Jesus would fit a glass slipper. So then he stops the world and gets off and goes and lives in heaven with his dad. Or he kind of becomes part of his dad, like in the Hindu system where you re-enter Brahma after your final incarnation. Whatever. Now, I get that he came back from the dead because his dad had a get-out-of-death-free card. Again, white privilege. But my question is, what was he doing all the whole time he was dead? I guess he went to heaven and partied? Yeah! He got him some Roman pussy while he was up there. So then, his best friends in all the world run around and keep his legend alive. Yeah, this story is actually supposed to be written from their perspective after the fact. Like, I think it's supposed to be the old unreliable narrator thing, you know, Rashomon. It would explain a lot of the contradictions. And this part goes on. And on. And on. In fact, I think these bits are actually longer than the account of Christ's life. It's like the main story takes place in only a short amount of time. Well, the book actually deals with all the lead-up and all the fallout of Christ's life, which is a unique approach to say the least, giving a look into the entirety of a story. Like I said, it literally starts from the beginning of time, and now we go to the end of time.
It's the final countdown.
So now we gotta get to the big, dumb ending. Admittedly, I do like this ending. It wraps everything up nice and neat, closes off almost every plot thread, almost, and goes out with a bang. I mean, a story this long and epic can't be anything less, right? So it starts with this asshole smoking the good stuff and having visions, which seems to be a common theme with this book. He sees Jesus back up in heaven playing with his giant scroll, and he undoes the scroll and lets loose a couple of horsies. I guess Jesus was the original brony, so he lets these horses out, and they kick ass! They bring war, pestilence, famine, and eventually death!
Patron, he said someone will come to revenge for him.
something like a sick horse who comes to sit with him. He talk crazy, you know.
Then a disaster of biblical proportions breaks out. Fire and brimstone from the skies, rivers and seas boiling, 40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes, the dead rising from the grave, human sacrifice, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, and right in the middle of it all, Jesus comes back and has the final showdown with Satan after all that. Oh yeah, it's epic. The best thing is, since the freaking world ends, it really negates the whole purpose of the previous story. Think about it. Everything the characters had done, all the generations of people, all the prayers to God, the lives lost and kingdoms gained, is all for naught. God, in his infinite jackassery, just blows up the world and acts like it means something. And I think that's the real point of this. No matter how long you write your book, or how popular it is, or how many stupid fans you've accrued over the years, in the end, it's all pointless. The world will end one day or another, by whatever reason, and everything will be swallowed up with it. Everything you leave behind will slip away, and your life will be forgotten in the long run. I don't think it has to be anything so dramatic. You are going to die no matter what you do. I think, despite the book's visions of life after death, it doesn't really care about that. It demonstrates that your life is the only thing that matters, and once it's gone, it's gone. Don't waste your goddamn time sitting around reading endless books like this, or even watching YouTube videos. Live life and all it has to offer. Taste and touch and feel as much as a man can, because this isn't a video game. You don't get a second chance. There's only one go-around. There's a big world out there, and it's waiting.
Ed. Yes? Visions are worth fighting for. Why spend your life making someone else's dreams?
Our songs will all be silenced. But what of it? Go on singing.
The Latin term for that sentiment is carpe diem. Now, who knows what that means?
Oh, fuck you. You don't owe it to yourself. You owe it to me. Because tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and I'll be 50. And I'll still be doing this shit.
Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
Because a man that doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
Short of being dead, what the hell are you doing this for anyway? Wad Up is my friend. Yeah, well, I got lots of friends. I don't.
Never amount to anything more than a single drop in a limitless ocean.
What is an ocean but a multitude of drops?
What if it's too hard?
Yeah, what if it's too hard?
Turkleton, I have no idea why you're chiming in, but I'll say this to both of you. Nothing in this world that's worth having comes easy.
A single mom who's working 2 jobs and still finds time to take her kid to soccer practice, that's a miracle. A teenager who says no to drugs and yes to an education, that's a miracle.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Come on!
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Beneath this mask there is an idea, Mr. Creedy. And ideas are bulletproof.
Just one chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Fed and drank with the sun on our shoulders and felt like free men. Hell, we could have been tarring the roof of one of our own houses.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42.
Well, that's the end of the film. Now here's the meaning of life. Thank you, Brigitte. Well, it's nothing very special.
Try and be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, and try and live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations.
Ain't no tongue can tell the words from my head, and they fall to the floor. That if God is on our side, and stop the next war.